afternoon and welcome to the Daily Interlake series of legislative candidate debates. I'm Matt Baldwin, Regional Editor for Hagadone, Montana. Today we are joined by the candidates for Kalispell Senate District 4. We've got Republican John Fuller and Democrat Kyle Waterman here today. Thank you both for joining us. In this debate format, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an introduction before we get into a series of 6 questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer their question, along with a 30-second follow-up response. We're going to wrap up the debate with 2-minute closing remarks. A recording of the debate will be posted to the dailyinterlake.com and to the Daily Interlake's Facebook page. So without further delay, we're going to get into our opening remarks. We're going to start with Mr. Fuller. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you all for viewing this debate. I am John Fuller, your Republican candidate for Senate District 4, and still currently your representative for House District 8 of West Kalispell. And I've served the last 2 sessions. Being a retired American government teacher, economics teacher, and history teacher, as well as a Vietnam veteran, I earned the nickname in the last 2 sessions as the legislator most likely to give a history lesson with every speech. I'm an unabashed believer in American excellence, and I'm ready to defend the principles upon which this great nation was founded from the salts of today. I've spent my adult life defending and teaching American exceptionalism in combat in Vietnam, in the classroom, and on the floor of the legislature of the great state of Montana. The most pressing issues facing our state in Flathead County are problems shared by all freedom-loving Americans: obtainable housing, inflation, rising energy costs, and possible shortages, as well as rising crime, increasing mental illness issues such as depression in our children, and shocking suicide rates amongst our youth and veterans. The pandemic of drug and alcohol addictions, workforce development, excessive federal encroachment into Montana's sovereignty, the crushing debt being placed on our children and grandchildren, and the cultural war against our American and Montana values stand out as the most obvious. My most obvious strengths are my experience in the legislature, teaching American government, economics, and history for over 40 years, serving on the Montana Board of Public Education, serving as a field representative for a Montana congressman, and my experience of representing the community as a teacher, coach, elected official, and leadership skills learned while a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. My voting record is self-evident, and my sponsorship and co-sponsorship of successful legislation are also well recognized. You can find a list of my legislative accomplishments on my website, www.fullersd4.com, as well as other essays, podcasts, and videos outlining my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Waterman, you're next.
Thank you, Matt. And again, thank you for everybody who's watching in, but thank you for making the forum and a forum that is approachable to everybody who has busy schedules in Kalispell. I'm Kyle Waterman. I'm the Democrat running for Senate District number 4. I was born and raised in Montana, but proud to call Kalispell home. I have served on the Kalispell City Council for 4 years. I was also the city representative on the health board, and that has been through the last couple of years through the COVID event. When I was on the health board, and what really was one of the priorities there that I worked on before the epidemic was about suicide prevention and making sure that our behavioral health systems were adequate before we even entered into the pandemic, because it has been a problem that has been persistent in Montana, growing, and then definitely accelerated in 2020. I also am the chair of the Flathead Transportation Board. This is the mountain climber, and public transportation has been a solution that I've been working on locally for multiple years since I was on city council. Before that, I used to work with Intermountain Children's Services, which is a nonprofit here that works with traumatized youth, and I was familiar and saw them firsthand how things were broken in our foster care system and our systems in Montana. And that really motivated me into public service, like I say, in 2017. What I learned when I was on city council is that I was there to represent everybody, not just the people who voted for me, not the people who I just agreed with, but everybody in the community. That has been my work, and my success is how to make sure to keep Kalispell a community that can be fair, unique, and neighborly. And in other words, how to keep Kalispell Kalispell. That's what I believe that we need in the State House. What I've learned in my public service is that we need a state representative who can help represent Kalispell in Helena, help solve our problems locally, from Main Street issues to kids who are facing depression and suicidality. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, thank you for those opening remarks. We're going to get into a series of questions now. And our first one, Kyle's going to go first. So I want to start with a topic that is top of mind for everyone in Northwest Montana right now, and that's housing. Governor Gianforte earlier this year established a housing task force. It's tasked with finding solutions to this worsening crisis, and the group issued its initial report just this week. Some of the recommendations that they're put forth are encouraging more dense development in cities, eliminating bans on AUDs, creating more grant programs, among other options. I want to hear, what do you think is the main cause of Montana's housing challenges? Where is the need the greatest, and what can be done to correct the market? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Waterman, and you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. This is the issue that I hear the most when I was on city council, but also as I'm out doing doors. It is getting expensive to be able to live in the Flathead, but like I say, it is a problem that's facing the entire state. The reasons why I think it is I think that we're popular. I think that people want to move here, and it is a market-driven. The market is driving the prices going up. It is also the supplies and the ability to find the workforce to build housing is making things more and more expensive. I think that the governor is right. I think that some of the things that we need to start to look at is infill, but number one is local control. The solution that I see is on city councils and on the county government. It really is the state's job to make sure that we bring money literally down to the ground. I think where the state can be a partner in helping build that infill and build that density into our communities is literally the land underneath, using whether it's the education public trust monies that we have of public trust lands, or monies to be able to invest in land trusts to help build affordability. Because once you put an apartment building on, or even housing that you can return, you can start to create a revolving fund, but you can also start to build affordability into the community. It is also being able to find how to loosen those strings. I supported us having ADUs in the Flathead in Kalispell, and I think that that's part of that work is true where we need to do that. Get rid of those regulations.
Thanks. John, you've got 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, I'm gratified that my opponent in this is using Republican solutions to the problem when he says get rid of the regulations. However, I would point out that except for providing tax incentives for those people who provide more attainable housing, and I'm not sure that our constituents here in Kalispell would support the states reaching down to the individual county and zoning commissions and determining the standards that the local communities have established to protect their constituents. Consequently, the best source to tackle this problem is the local communities, county governments, and non-governmental organizations. If you expect the state of Montana government to solve this problem from the top down, what will happen is that there will be massive wealth transfer, incredible inefficiencies, and enormous externalities. Okay, so the property taxes, which go along with, of course, why obtainable housing is difficult to obtain, is the reason why we have a crisis. There are a number of solutions, and of course, that I think would be best served by the people of the county and those who wish to expand the housing problem. Housing supply, I should say, need to make that happen.
Thanks, John. Kyle, would you like to respond? You've got 30 seconds.
Sure. I think Mr. Fuller just identified I am not a typical Democrat. I am not here to just espouse a platform. I actually have worked locally, and that is, I think, one of the solutions that I see that we did in city council was addressing some affordability, again, on that city council level of bringing down impact fees. and also making sure that we build spaces, like taking out the train tracks from the center of Kalispell so that we could take an industrial zone and make it into a housing zone, because centralized connected services is also how we're able to build affordability. So thank you.
John?
Well, if you're not a typical Democrat, why didn't you run as a Republican in the primary? That would be my question. Obviously, I'd be interested in hearing later why you're running as a Democrat. But the first response to this, the regulations that the county has and the zoning commissions that they put in place designed to protect the people of its community, of course, might need to be altered and changed to meet this, to deal with the more affordable housing. But remember, we have a lot of people in this county that have already demonstrated that the "not in my backyard" syndrome, and so they are voters too, and so we need to have a dialogue, and I think that dialogue is best be kept here within the county, and so that we solve locally our solution to this major affordability and quantity problem.
Thank you, John. All right, we're going to go into another question here, but we're going to stay on the housing topic. Let's talk property taxes. As you both probably well know, there's broad concern among Montanans about rising property taxes and really the fear of getting priced out of your home, particularly among residents on fixed incomes. What are you hearing from constituents about this issue, and what are your ideas for property tax relief? And as a follow-up, if you believe property taxes need to be reformed or reduced, how could the state make up the difference in that revenue? John, we're going to start with you. You've got 90 seconds.
Thank you. The first thing with property taxes, of course, is that it was, I believe, in the 2015 legislature. I was not in the legislature at the time. The state of Montana went from 6-year reappraisals to 24 months. I think a useful thing to do would be to go back to 6 years reappraisals. And the rationale for doing that, of course, was saying that you wouldn't get sticker shock after 6 years. But the reality is that people would have 4 years of less property taxes. There's also, of course, the idea that there's possible that the mill levies that the state takes in could be returned to the counties for them to use to reduce property taxes. I believe there will be a bipartisan effort to do just that, to provide people with some relief. And I am willing to support that myself. However, the thing about property taxes that people have to remember is most of the money goes to the schools. It stays within the county, and people keep passing increases in their taxes to do one thing or another for the schools. They can have to learn to expect that property taxes increases go along with that. So you might be more considerate in your choice of the school board.
Thanks, John. Kyle?
Thank you. I think that one of the challenges I see with property taxes is that it is one of the only levers that we can use on the local level. As John says, it's for schools, it's for the county government, it's for local government. And it is a challenge that when we see unfunded, what I call unfunded mandates that come down from the state legislature, when there are some things that we could, with like the state surplus right now, help support building out Reserve Drive or addressing some of our issues on Main Street, then if the city still needs to have that, if the community needs to have that because we're growing really fast and we need to have ways to manage, city council gets boxed into a situation where they have to raise taxes. Mayor Johnson recently raised up the fact that really does come down to some of our other centralized services, the fire and the police department, which again, here we are in a county that's growing super fast. We have not in city limits, but it's the county itself. And for Kalispell, it's fire and police it's the citizens of Kalispell, the property owners in town, who are really responsible for doing that. I think that also the state could give some relief of how we're funding those centralized services. But also, as John says, there are some good ideas of how we can put circuit breakers in to make sure that seniors and long-term residents aren't being priced out. But I think we also could look at some of the taxes that we do on seniors when it comes down to Social Security benefits, or those who are veterans who are also being taxed. So I think that there's some ways to do that, but part of it is how to find other vehicles for local government to be able to use, and how to make sure that the state isn't just passing down some mandates to the local level, which forces us to raise property taxes.
John, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, well, the subject of unfunded mandates, of course, is near and dear to Republicans' hearts, and we don't. We try desperately to avoid doing them. But you might notice that there is one group of people that needs serious relief, and I'm planning on introducing legislation to make sure that 100% disabled veterans here in the state of Montana can be like 40 other states where they'll be exempt from the property taxes. These disabled veterans need to be able to have the opportunity to live in their homes, and it might have to be a smart home, but they need to be able to live there without paying property taxes. And I'm going to make sure that happens.
Kyle, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear the commitment to addressing some of our overtaxing for seniors, but also for veterans. I think it is time that Montana comes up to a modern age of how we're using taxes. And remember that right now, when we have only income tax and property tax, we are putting a lot of burdens onto property tax owners or property owners. And it's how do we build into that some relief so that there's other vehicles to be able to make some funding for, again, I think that local level, but how to make sure that we're looking for real solutions of how Montana can move into the modern age and modernize our tax vehicles so that we are keeping up with the times and also providing essential services.
All right, thank you both. All right, we're going to do one more sort of budget-related question, and we're going to talk about that projected $1 billion surplus. Do you favor rebates? And are there certain programs you believe some of those funds should go toward? Mr. Waterman, we're going to begin with you. 90 seconds.
Thank you for the question. We are in a unique situation, and it really does become out of fiscal responsibility that we have created a surplus in Montana. We're one of the few states that really is always actively passing a budget every 2 years and making sure that we are living within our means. So when we see growth like we are and see the capital gains and see the increased use, we're starting to see a surplus. I do not support putting that back into a rebate. I do think that there are some places where we need to consider doing that, but I think it's taking that one-time money and making sure that we're catching ourselves up. Number one priority to me is our behavioral health system, and that includes the Montana State Hospital, which is a dated facility and is a dated system. But most importantly, Kalispell and the Flathead has always been treated as a satellite and an outpost to our behavioral health system in Montana. It's always been coming from Missoula or Helena or Deer Lodge, what our supports are. We need to have local services here. We need to make sure that we have rehab and facilities here and look at how to have that restorative justice to make sure that when somebody is facing these addictions and these behavioral health issues, we're not sending them away. And unfortunately, right now, if we don't address the state hospital, what we're really doing is sending them out of state and even further away. I think that that's one of those things that we need to be able to do. I would use recreational marijuana money to help do the long term, but use that one-time money for some of the investments that we need now here in Kalispell.
Thank you. John, you've got 90 seconds.
Well, Governor Gianforte is on record saying that when and if the government collects a tax surplus, it should be returned to those who paid it as soon as possible. There was a call for a special session to deal with the 1.4, almost probably closer to $2 billion surplus, and provide rebates to that. I voted for that special session, but the appetite for the legislature was not sufficient for that special session to be called. But notice what he did not say, the governor, that is. He did not say that a surplus should be used as an excuse to increase government spending or create new government programs. And Republicans are not adverse to spending money to improve the opportunities of working families of Montana. But what Republicans are opposed to is the redistribution of wealth, such as the forgiveness of student debt, inflating the currency, increasing taxes, and spending our grandchildren's future servicing the debt. So when the 68th legislature meets in January, the surplus will be front and center. And issues such as property tax relief, income tax reduction, infrastructure repairs, good water treatment facilities, pension funding and reform, law enforcement support, etc., will all get due consideration. My personal efforts will be directed toward property tax relief, veterans, schools, and protecting our children's safety and their opportunities.
Thank you. Kyle, you have 30 seconds.
I see returning the money, that investing into Main Street, investing into our local infrastructure, investing into that behavioral health system is a way of returning the money to the citizens. Because if we don't take that one-time opportunity and make those investments, then we have to raise their property taxes. But I think more importantly, let's see how we can make sure that our economy gets rolling and keeps having a surplus so that we are a growing economy and we start paying for having growth, pay for growth. How do we start to make sure that Montana is an engine moving forward and that we from the legislature can show how we will take ourselves out of the teetering into a recession? Thank you.
Thanks. John, 30 seconds.
Well, the surplus, of course, there are so many good causes that the surplus will be. I was told by a legislator once, a longtime legislator, that the easy sessions are the one there is no money. And the last two sessions we've had none, relatively speaking. This session promises to be, as he said, bitter and vitriolic, meaning that there will be a lot of cause for dissension because of everyone wants to spend this money. Well, as I stated already, besides income tax reduction, reductions on the capital equipment tax, and things that will help all Montanans is what Republicans and I support.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to shift topics now. The U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision put the discussion of abortion policy to the states. However, abortion remains legal in Montana based on the state's constitutional right to individual privacy. Tell us where you stand on abortion access and the state's privacy clause. Mr. Fuller, you're up first. You're going to have 90 seconds.
Thank you. The Dobbs decision, which repealed Roe v. Wade, means that the state of Montana and the people of the sovereign state of Montana can determine the future. I offer to you the following syllogism. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States says that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That means an adjudication of some kind. Modern science and DNA has proved beyond a reasonable doubt that upon conception, a new person has been conceived and is and that person, subject to being killed and their life being taken without due process of law, is a violation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. No matter what the Armstrong decision says, the ultimate decision, the Dobbs decision, did not address this issue. It only addressed the problems dealing with the legislation from the bench that was evident in Roe v. Wade. The Armstrong decision was hiding behind Roe v. Wade. Now the people of Montana can decide. And notice what I said. No life, liberty, or property should be taken from anyone without due process of law. So that means an adjudication process is necessary before a woman's so-called privacy usurps and surpasses someone's right to life.
Thank you. Kyle, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you for the question. This is what makes me a Democrat. So the Dobbs decision does say that it's up to the states to make decisions on regarding abortion. We're fortunate to live in Montana, where we already have a state constitution that includes a privacy clause. So what the Supreme Court is asking is exactly where Montana is right now. It is not the state's right to criminalize women or doctors in these procedures. When I go and talk to people, that's what they talk to me about. They don't want to see this expansion into a private decision, which it is a private decision. Government does not have a right to be in that doctor's office. That decision is between a woman and her doctor. This is a medical procedure. We're not talking always about somebody who's having a pregnancy that can go to full term. We're also being able to talk about what those procedures are for other reasons. I mean, there's reasons that we have to be able to acknowledge that this is medical, but also it is a private decision for any individual, any family, to decide when and how and who they want to have a family with. That's the privacy clauses that I've always understood. I always understood that even when I was on the health board. That's why I never supported vaccine mandates or mask mandates, because that privacy clause in Montana says that you cannot force people to make these decisions. This is one of the liberties that we defend and is enshrined in our state constitution. I will stand up for the state constitution, but I'm proud to be a Democrat that is able to say, I will keep government out of this private life and your private decisions.
John, you've got 30 seconds.
I'm gratified to hear a Democrat claim and adopt Republican policies regarding individual freedom and liberty. And individual freedom and liberty includes the right to life. And so I would offer to you that when does a person become a person? And when does your right to privacy allow you to kill another person? Okay, that needs to be adjudicated. And currently under the Armstrong decision, that is not a clear-cut status, in that here in Montana under the Armstrong decision, a baby can be killed late term because the Pain Capable Act has still been enjoined by the liberal judge in Billings. So my position is we need a process. We need to clear-cut delineate when this process could be, if ever, allowed.
Kyle, 30 seconds.
Late-term abortion is rare and, again, a very complicated decision. Usually what it involves is making a decision of the baby's life or the mother's life. That is complex. Again, that is that woman's decision to be able to make that. And being able to understand that in Montana, this is private decision is just fundamental for what I believe of where we are in Montana. I was raised by a mom who said I was responsible if I got somebody pregnant. But that's how we can raise our children and what we want to do in our own households. But the government doesn't have a right to get into those conversations or push into your doctor's office.
All right, thank you both. I'm going to change topics one more time. Let's talk about schools. I'm curious, what is your assessment of the state of education in Montana today? What reforms would you support in regards to funding, policy, and school safety? Kyle, you're first on this one. You're going to have 90 seconds.
Thank you for the question. I think that right now we're actually seeing some reports out of how schools are doing. We're seeing some reading scores coming down. We're seeing that it's not working out as well. We need to get back into that. But I guess I always understood that, again, when I was on the health board, to make sure that why it was important for 2020 for our schools to be open in Montana. And also why it was important to make sure that school sports were open in Montana. I do think that we have to remember that schools is where we're building up our future. And it's what I say, I think in Montana, we need to talk about what our economic future is. And it's very much what we can do with early childhood education, but also education in general. To me, that's also about making sure that STEM research and that work is able to be out there, to make sure that investment in making sure that kids are ready with good with math and ready to take on the new computer science jobs that are out there. But if we want to build up an economy here in Montana and lead in an economy, education is a key tool in that. All the way from, like I say, pre-K through education, and then looking at our community colleges and how we're able to do trades and apprenticeship programs. Education is essential for making a strong workforce and a healthy, strong community. I support that. I will always support education in Montana and make sure that it's free and open to the public.
Thank you. John?
Well, I believe my educational credentials are surpassed by no one after spending 45 years in public education and serving on the Montana State Board of Public Education, the governing body for all K through 12 schools. And if for people if they think your property taxes are high now, wait till you get the bill for the millions of dollars that will be required to introduce and have state-sponsored pre-K education. The state of Montana's education is like it is nationally. We're better than the national average, of course. But for the past 3 years, Democrat policies have led to a serious deterioration in learning achievement for our students. This is the first year in 3 years that our students got to start a normal school year. And that was because of Democrat policies regarding to the pandemic. The school safety issue, I'm on record as saying that there is no one person more motivated to protect their children than the teachers other than their parents. And consequently, when it comes to school safety, what's wrong with the idea that qualified teachers be the ones who could be also armed and ready to deal with a active shooter in the school. As a veteran, and I know for a fact that there are numerous teachers in the Kalispell school district that are more than qualified to be active defenders of their students.
Kyle, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I disagree. I think that already teachers are doing a lot in Montana, being able to put the school safety onto them, as well as the curriculum, the planning, the school supplies. That's a lot to put on somebody who's being paid $30,000 to $35,000 a year. We also need to make sure that we invest in our public teachers. We need to be able to find those solutions so they can make a pathway to affordable housing or home ownership. But right now, we need to have teachers who are just invested in so that they can take care of our children and be successful. That's what I support, is making sure that they are there. When it comes down to public safety, we see a lot of security, and all the security assessments are saying we're doing really good. We're doing a good job of keeping care of our kids. I want to see what the school board solutions are, and that's where it belongs, not in the state legislature.
John?
Well, just for clarification's sake, when a Democrat talks about investing in education, what they mean is raising taxes and doing more top-down decisions making for public schools. Okay, the reality is that here in Montana and Flathead County, our schools have of course begun to adopt policies that are not reflective of the community. For years, I taught young people that the four most important people that they elected and had the most impact on their lives were their county commissioners, their city councilors, their sheriff, and their school board. People are now, as the pandemic and the Democrat policies regarding the pandemic, people are learning how important that and how correct I was when I taught that. Thank you.
All right, we're going to do one more question. Let's touch on Montana's judicial system and the elections. Just last week, we saw a Montana judge rule that a trio of new voting laws passed by the 2021 legislature were unconstitutional. The laws were to end same-day registration, create new ID requirements for students, and restrict third-party ballot collection. Curious what you make of this ruling, and as a follow-up, are you confident in Montana's election system? John, you're first on this one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, isn't it interesting that that which was constitutional a little over 20 years ago is now suddenly unconstitutional because an activist judge in Billings that the plaintiffs shopped and found has come to the conclusion that they are now, a quote, an undue burden. Thomas Jefferson called legislators who like to, judiciary or judges who like to legislate from the bench, he called them monarchs in black robes. And I think we have seen in light of the judges' actions here recently and also in the Montana State Supreme Court, that prediction might be true. It is egregious to me that the people's representatives are now no longer relevant when 7 judges can decide from their own viewpoints what is or is not the people's will and constitutional. Okay, the idea that our election system is sacrosanct, which it is, it should be, but any effort to try to secure more election integrity here in Montana is regarded as an effort to deprive people of their right to vote. It is no such thing. The people that are entitled to vote in Montana are U.S. citizens living in Montana and Montana citizens, and they are entitled to their vote to be fair, equitable, and legitimate.
Kyle?
Thank you. One, I'm very confident in our election system in Montana. I see that here locally where we've had multiple recounts and coming back with the same number each time. I think that we have a good system that's working. I support those public workers, and it's dangerous to say that we're not. So that's just number one. Number two, in America, we've always said that it's important to have the separation of power. It is not the job of the legislature to really change or try to change how we get elect or select judiciary appointments. That keeping that free and open election system, since it does work, is the way to go. I think it's also just important to remember that legislature gets together for 90 days, and it's important to be able to look at what that use of that time is to make sure that we're not hitting into unconstitutional legislation that is going to end up being rejected by the courts. Many of the legislative items that were passed in 2021 had notes from staff that point out that was unconstitutional and was going to face legal challenge. That is a waste of the taxpayers' time when we keep pushing forward legislation that is going to be challenged in the courts. Let's use those 90 days productively, wisely, and make sure that we have a government that's working, but also a government that's recognizing the separation of powers and that we are a nation built on a rule of law. And that is what the judiciary is working on doing, and not question what they are doing and call them names and politicize this any more than we need to.
John,
well, with all due respect, you're showing, of course, that your failure to recognize that among 3 branches of government, the people's legislature was always meant to be first among the equals. And now the people's legislature is last among equals. And after 16 years of Democrat governors, with a deep state entrenched even in the Helena and in the state government of Montana, the so-called litigation prospects does not mean that they are accurate. We now have a litigious society, and of course, when we have a judiciary that does not reflect the will of the people, evidenced by the vast majorities of the bills that they have overturned, it only illustrates the need that there needs to be a return to the balance that the framers of the Constitution intended. And so Do we have election integrity here in Flathead County? Yes, we do. But that's not necessarily true in other counties here in Montana. And it is certainly not true in other areas. And of course, one thing you can take to the bank is when we have significant quantities of non-residents at our universities voting as if they were residents here in Montana, that presents a problem and dilutes the votes here of our longtime residents. Thank you.
Kyle, go ahead.
Again, the studies of the state electoral system have said that they are working throughout the whole state, not just in the Flathead. I think it is unfair to do that, but also just how I learned American history and what I know in Montana, the separation of the three branches is important. There's not one branch that's above the other. It's not the governor above the legislature above the governor. It is about the three branches. They are checks and balances. That's how the system works. That is working in Montana. What we're doing is just making up stories. This is not a real issue that we're having. I think, again, it's more important for the state legislature to come into session and work on real Main Street issues. Again, that's a housing, affordability. How do we make sure that our local governments have control and not be overturned by the legislature?
All right. Well, that's our questions. Thanks for getting through those. We're going to do some closing remarks now. Why don't you tell us why you're the right choice to represent your district in the legislature? And Mr. Waterman, you're going to go first, and you're going to have 2 minutes.
Thank you again for the invitation to come and join you. Mr. Fuller asked a question, why didn't I run as a Republican? Well, there's no room in the Republican Party to run as a pro-choice union supporting member. They also don't like rhinos. I think it's important to be open and transparent with who I am getting elected by. I did grow up in Montana, so I do understand conservative values. I do understand how to work within my means. And I think that's important to be able to say that, like most Montanans, I'm independent, I'm moderate, I'm able to get into those conversations, but I'm also able to listen. I'm able to listen to what the problems are that have been identified at city council, but what I also hear on doors, but also what I hear when I'm on Main Street talking to small businesses. They want problem solvers. They don't want us to have smoke screens or go down and expand government into their private decisions. They want government that works. It's not about a small or big government. It's about having a good government that works for Montana. I'm committed to be a state senator who's, one, able to listen, but also to work for good government. But more important, represent everybody. Those who vote for me, those who vote against me. I will take the working solutions that I have with my delegation locally, but I will find partners across this state because I grew up in Montana. I do understand Montana values. And to me, those values are keeping things fair, how to keep our communities unique, how to keep our communities neighborly. That's what I have stated as my values. My opponent says that he's the only person that's listed off those values, but I'm willing to share with you what I believe my values are. I am willing to meet and represent you and keep coming back. It's that transparency. That's why I ran as a Democrat. I understand that maybe there's this idea that I should have put on sheep's clothing and be able to run Republican. It wouldn't work. I think it's more important to go and meet Montanans and meet Kalispell where they are and fight to keep Kalispell. And that's what I'm committed to do as your next state senator.
Thank you. John.
Well, thank you again for watching and listening to this debate. Montana is still a small town with long streets. And wherever you go in Montana, a stranger is a friend you have not yet met. And we all share a love for the last best place. Montana is still a free state. And both my wife and I are confident we know where we're going when we die, but we are leaving from Montana. I still have legislative goals to accomplish as your next senator from Kalispell, such as a state cemetery for veterans in Northwest Montana, exempting retired veterans' pensions from the state income tax, workforce development for our veterans, defending the unborn, increasing the technical career opportunities for young people, protecting Montanans' access to public lands, enhancing our Second Amendment rights, securing sustainable and adequate funding for our educational system without rising property taxes, providing relief to Montana's small businesses by increasing the waiver on the business equipment tax. Additionally, addressing the issues of protecting the integrity of our elections and the propensity of our judiciary, that which Thomas Jefferson called those monarchs in black robes, to legislate from the bench will be paramount. In conclusion, I thank you for your viewership and your reflected thought. This election will determine the course of Montana and America. If you wish to continue the policies of the Biden administration here in Montana, vote Democrat. If you wish to continue, if you wish to keep Montana, vote Republican. I have the experience, the knowledge of the legislative process, and the ability to put together a consensus to achieve mutually desirable goals to benefit the people of Kalispell, Flathead County, and the great state of Montana. I have a lifetime of service to this nation, my students, and this community, and I would be honored to continue to serve as your senator from Kalispell. So thank you, and God bless Montana.
All right. Thank you both. That was a great discussion. Thank you for taking time to participate this afternoon.
Thank you.
A reminder to Montana residents, they can register to vote online at sosmt.gov/elections/vote. That's sosmt.gov/elections/vote. John, Kyle, thank you again for joining us. Be sure to visit dailyinterlake.com for ongoing election coverage and to view additional candidate debates. Everyone has a great day.
Thank you.